Okay, I want to pause.
That's fine. That's the nice thing about this one. It's not live, so you'll do the
Yeah,
edits and stuff. Yeah.
I'll do that. So, Dr. Ngao, welcome to Superlead Podcast.
Thank you so much. This has been a long time coming.
It's been a mighty long time. We schedule and then we reschedule, and your life gets busier and busier. So I'm super chuffed that we got to connect. Um,
Yeah,
so
me too.
so first of all, congrats on the book. I feel like I'm way too late to be saying this in a recorded line, but massive congratulations.
No, thank you very much. I really, really appreciate it. As you know, I mean, you're credited in the book too. I remember when I started and I thought, who has written a book lately? Because I'm struggling, and gave you a call, and your call, that call really gave me the oomph and what I needed to get on with it.
Lovely. No. I'm glad we had the call because the book is now here. Now we want to talk about the book, but before that, I wanted to give our listeners a sort of a window into the author. And
Mhm.
as we traditionally do here on the podcast, we want to find out who you are. And we like to kind of get the story from as early as you can still remember. And hopefully, you can cover some highlights and a bit of, areas that are worth amplifying. But who is Dr. Ngao?
This is always an interesting question. Let's see how I'm going to answer it today, because each time I'm asked the same question, I answer it differently.
Yeah.
So who am I? I'm first of all, my name is Ngao, and almost everybody says your name is so unusual. What is it? What is it short for? It's not short for anything. It's Ngao. That's the full name.
But
And yes,
what
it
does it
is.
mean?
No, that's what I'm also the story. That's it's a very unusual name, particularly in the South African context. However, another side story is that I found one or two other Ngaos in East Africa, in Kenya. So it just
Right.
shows how connected we are. But I think who I am and the significance of my name is I am named after my dad's Rakhadi. And in our cultures, even also in Venda, Makazi, the
Yes.
significance of Rakhadi. So I am my father's Rakhadi, and I mean he used to call me fondly as Rakhadi. So that is the significance of who I am. And the interesting thing is, I grew up not calling myself Ngao. I was calling me by my other names. And then one day, as part of growing up and the evolution of reflecting, of asking myself these fundamental questions, and I thought to myself, but why am I not calling myself now? Ngao might be looking for me and is not finding me because I call myself by other names. And
Oh.
on that day, I called myself Ngao. So that's a little bit, I don't know what it says, but it also gives a little bit of a glimpse into how I live my life. I don't take my life for granted. I'm reflective. And the other bit, I suppose, is that um, between myself, the firstborn, my sister, and me, there was a daughter. My parents had a daughter, and her name was Buntle. And Buntle died as a youngster 2 years before, and 2 years later, I came along. So I often, in my reflection as I go through life, I
Yeah.
often say Buntle passed in
Sure.
order for me to be here. Had
Sure.
Buntle lived, I probably would not have been here. Therefore, I don't take being here for granted.
And where was this? Where did you grow up?
I was born in the then Selborne, Lady Selborne. So I'm a real Pretoria girl, Selborne. But my father, my roots is in Khomo. My father is from a village called Khomo, just just outside of Makapanstad. I was born in Selborne, then raised mainly around the townships in Pretoria, but also traveled a lot because at the time, you know, your parents, if they were school teachers or inspectors, they get shipped to certain places. So I lived all over. At some point, we lived in Mafikeng and so on and so forth. But I born and raised in Pretoria, in and around Pretoria, but I regard my roots as Khomo. You know, as you grow older, you identify more with where your roots are really are. And for me, my roots are in Khomo.
Lovely, lovely. And I just wonder what, as you reflect, what the impact of moving around at an early age potentially has as in your character building and
Yeah.
those, especially in those early years.
Yeah. Um, I think now that you think of that's actually a good question. Now that I think about it, it speaks to my ability to adapt. Because I now thinking about it from grade one, well, it's called grade one, to almost like I had different schools. I moved several times.
Sure.
And each time I went into the school, there's a new kid, but then the new kid somehow just adapted, and I suppose it speaks to the adaptability. And the interesting thing, my sister would laugh because I remember when I started school, the only time I remember struggling with adapting was when I went to that school, to big school, and my sister was there. It was in Mativestad because my mother at the time had started a clinic around Mativestad, so we moved there. And I remember sitting outside of my sister's class and crying, and they would be like, "Oh, Motsei, there she is, go sort her out." And after that, as soon as I went to different schools, I had to find my way in the
Sure.
world. So
Lovely.
in hindsight, I've always been able to find my way in the world and adapt.
And you've grown to be a global citizen. Not only do you, when you write a book, you get interviewed all over the world.
Yeah,
I
I suppose that's also, again, this is the beauty of what your question it does for me. I kind of recall also growing up, my father used to, we used to go to holidays as a family. In hindsight, I think my father, for a black man, for an African man, was ahead of his time.
lovely.
Also, in terms of how he raised us girls. But anyway, he one thing that in hindsight, I took from him is the love for travel. Because every school holidays, he would bundle us into a little foxy, that little bus, and we would drive to Mgababa, and it was noisy and fun. So I suppose that's where the bug for traveling, and because traveling also gives you different eyes, a different way to look at the world.
Oh, stunning. And then maybe not too fast forward, but as we forward through career, you go to high school and then at varsity, what do you end up studying?
So the interesting thing is, I remember growing up I can't remember which township it was. It must have been Mabupani or something. There was one lady who drove a VW Beetle Foxy, you know, the
Yeah, 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 yeah,
VW Beetle Foxy.
yeah.
And I asked, why is the woman driving? What does she do? And they
Sure.
said, oh, she's a social worker. So I was like, oh, I'm going to be a social worker because I want to drive a GG. I want to drive a GG, you know,
Yeah.
Volkswagen and Bucky. And I ended up doing that. I went to to the University of the North, TEFLUOP, what was called then, and I did a BA in social work. I had no idea what I was doing, what this was. It's only because I wanted to drive that
Right.
Volkswagen. And I suppose that also was another defining moment in terms of my studying and career trajectory. Because after I finished, then I worked a little bit and I'm thinking, surely there's more to it than this. And then I went back to school. I went to UCT at the time. I did an honors degree in what they call then the social planning and administration. It was a combination of courses from social sciences and urban planning. So I just took a course in urban planning. Then I came back and worked at the development bank in the infrastructure development. And then I thought, I think I'm liking this urban, development infrastructure world.
Yeah.
Fast forward 3 years later, I applied for a scholarship, got a Fulbright scholarship, went to Cornell University and studied Masters in Urban and Regional Planning. And so it went. So almost every degree I studied is different. And every career role I did is different. However, what is common through it all is people. I started with social work. Social work is about people, is about understanding people, is about helping people. When I did the social planning course at UCT, at the point, I suppose I said it was more around social planning. How do you community development, if you like? I see. Then I transitioned into urban planning, but my specialization was in housing. And it was about creating habitable environments. So always, everything that I was doing, it was the central thing was about people and how I make sense of, and perhaps make it everything that I do about making things a little bit better for people. And surprise, surprise, look what I'm doing today.
Yeah. So you got the masters in urban planning, and then what happened? And then what took place?
And then I got the master's in urban planning. I came back and I actually went into consulting. At some point, I was
the most noble career in the whole entire world.
Absolutely. Went into consulting, became mainly strategy. I've always loved strategy consulting, but also in everything that I did career-wise. Leadership was always in the center. I was always fascinated by leadership. So fast forward to consulting. I remember when I did strategy consulting, for some reason, I ended up working with HR leaders. I worked with ExCos, but worked a lot more with HR leaders. And I remember saying to myself, I wonder if how the people I'm working with, if they make it their business to understand the business they are, how impactful they could be. And that was way before business partners, people talking about HR business partners having a seat around the table. And I remember saying to myself, if I was to ever get into this role, I would do HR differently. And again, be careful what you say. And I ended up being an HR director for a big financial services firm that was merging at the time.
Yes.
And I remember in one of my first few ExCo meetings, the group CEO saying, I've never seen an HR director that speaks so directly to business. And I thought, okay,
Oh,
I am doing
lovely.
HR differently.
Lovely, lovely. I remember this moment I don't think I can forget, but we were in this strategy session and there was an HR director and the CEO, and there was a lot of conversations going on. And then CEO kind of looked at the HR person and said, "Hey, you can wake up now. We're talking about sort of HR matters." And that just
Yeah,
broke my heart, eh?
yeah,
Where
yeah,
where
yeah,
HR is sort of left out to sort of,
yeah,
now that this has gonna impact people, you can wake up, come into
yeah,
the
yeah,
conversation.
yeah. Yeah, so that was essentially I have the clarity of if I was to go into this is so I made it, as I always say, I made it my business to always understand the business that I was in. But perhaps it was also part of my background, having dabbled in strategy, that helped.
Love, no, I get encouraged every time I see there's business partnering roles sort of get
Yeah.
really deep into the operations. So now you are HR director, and then what took place?
I'm HR director, and I am driving strategic, what I believe strategic initiatives that is aligned to the business. Because at the time, the business, as I said, two giants had just merged, so it was more a question of defining the one. I'm not going to say what the organization is, but the one, whatever that organization was, the one culture and my approach. So there were also dynamics when you come in from outside. As an HR director, I was head of HR and transformation. And I remember specifically, even my title, and I said that, was executive for strategic HR. So I put strategic,
Sure.
it was intentional.
Studying,
So,
studying.
so, um, I'm hoping you're hearing that in everything I do, I say, I express, there's always intent. So the intention was this HR here is going to be strategic. So part of it, I mean, I remember, but what I did, which is something that I think is valuable for anybody listening, for anybody getting into senior positions, especially executive positions, prepare,
Love.
prepare before you go in there. From day one, it should feel like, hey, something is happening around here. So I went in day one with a plan. Day one, I had the meeting with the group CEO. And the next few weeks, I was meeting with different leaders, and really was about listening. And some of the questions I asked, I recall, was simple questions like, what would you want me to do? What would
Sure.
you rather I should not even do? And what is
Yeah.
your understanding of the role of HR, for example? So it was just those basic questions, and they opened up a whole lot of things for me, to get a sense of the pulse of where the organization was, and what the expectations. You would say that, it was more about understanding, so as to develop expectations for ourselves. Big lesson for anybody that's going into the leadership position. You
Recall.
have to drive your agenda, but you also have to be willing to listen.
Sure.
And whatever the agenda has got to be informed by what you're hearing. And this is how you build credibility,
Love.
and credibility in the beginning, and by goodwill.
And then love the lessons. How do we end up meeting at Gibbs?
So this is an interesting thing. So when I was at that executive director there, one of the things that I started noticing, even in my previous roles, I've always been fascinated by the researchers, if you like, the scholars, the rigor in which they do their research, come with these frameworks. I use the different frameworks and I use different models. And somebody said to me, I remember on a few occasions, somebody saying to me, "You'd be a good teacher." And I was like,
Wow.
"Me, teacher,
Wow.
forget it." Um, and and also because I viewed academia in a different light. I remember my professor, my supervisor for the PhD, she's the one who kept on saying also, you really have to consider academia. And I said, I don't think academia is for me. However, as they say never. If I was to go into academia, it has to be a business school, because I cannot go to the traditional main campus, so to speak. And long story short, conversations were had, and I met Nicola at the time. Nicola was the
Yes.
dean.
Yes.
And incidentally, Maurice and I, the current dean, we were at the same organization together at EXCO, the same organization. So
All
another
right.
full circle. So and then I thought, okay, let me go chat to them. And I chatted, and then it just so happened that at that time I was also reflecting on what next, because I had hit the highest role that I could have envisaged for myself. So
Sure.
part of that, I was at a space of starting to think about my life beyond corporate, because I've always been very clear that I'm not going to retire at corporate. I've always believed in the world of and, not
Yes.
either or. When you're in corporate, you
Yeah.
do this, you're in this role, and that's all you do. You may not be able to do other things. And also because I have different passions, if you like. I mean, one of
Okay.
the things that I said is I studied different things. I did different jobs. So I always felt that I want to take all my experiences and put it into
Sure.
some kind of a career that I had
Sure.
designed for myself, that world of and. And
Yeah.
at that time, you know what they say, when the student is ready, the teacher
The
appears.
teacher
The teacher
appears. Yeah.
appeared in the form of a book called Portfolio Life. How
All
to
right.
how to live your life purposefully, after from the age of 50. And I think I had just celebrated my 50th. And then I was
Nice.
like, right, I'm getting into the portfolio life. And one of those portfolios is an educator. So that's when I said, okay, let's give Gibbs a chance. And I went to Gibbs, and I just loved. As I say, that's like 8 years ago. And
Sure.
that's probably the longest I've been to any organization. So maybe it says something about Gibbs. And then
Yeah.
yeah, so I then and I started, as you know, I taught organizational behavior,
Yeah.
and also was part of the team that curated the MBA with a focus on management consulting, which I was
Of
the lead
course.
faculty for. And then the rest. And then after that, I did that for 6 years, and I wanted to get back to my love of executives, working with executives, and I transitioned into working into executive education.
Lovely. Oh, I love it. I love that story. Love the story. There's something that hits me when you're saying, you get a book on the portfolio life, and you read
Yeah.
that, and then it just at that time makes you make the decision to
Yeah.
change your career, which sort of speaks to the power of books.
No, absolutely. It crystallized for
Sure.
me what I had been like, when I look back, I stay 3 years there and I change, I go do something different. And so the book crystallized what actually I have been living and I've been wanting to create. That this thing, actually, I'm not crazy. It's called a portfolio life. And it's okay for some people. Not everybody is going to go in that lane and be an accountant or a lawyer and know from the get-go that that's what the only thing they want to do. For me, that was not the case. So, but you're right, the power of books. So, it's also about how I read books.
Okay.
Books are impactful in my life, and they help to crystallize. It's more about what do you do with the insights you get from them.
Lovely, lovely. Now, talking about the book you authored as we transition smoothly, I just wonder, in the same way that the Portfolio Life book, the impact it had for you, I just wonder what you envisage as you're writing and you're going through the pain that we all go through. When it landed on someone's desk, what sort of impact were you hoping it might have?
So the impact, first of all, my intention for writing the book, because it started in my PhD, it's part of my PhD research. And when I did that research, I realized that workplace bullying is alive and people are in pain, are hurting, and people are not even aware. So
Sure.
when I finish my PhD, nobody reads your PhD except your supervisors and those that they have to. So as I went through, because at that point when I took a decision that I really want to do something about it. So as I started talking about workplace bullying, but 10, 12 years ago, nobody even paid me any mind because they were thinking, what are you talking about? We are not
Yeah.
in kindergarten. So fast forward to where I am with the book. So I then thought there is so much richness in the research that I got, that I really want to translate it in a way and write it in a way that is accessible. So
Excellent.
my first intent was to write a book
Yeah.
on this very complex and emotive subject in a way that it is accessible. Anybody that reads it would really relate, either as a target, either as a bystander, or if you're a leader, it would hopefully make you reflect on your own leadership, as to whether or not you may be an abrasive leader that bullies or not. So those were my intentions, but also broader for anybody that lives in the world of work ecosystem. They could still find something for themselves. So that is the intention. And so far, that's the feedback I've also been getting, that it's so accessible, or I could relate. It made me think, reflect, could I not? Which is I suppose is the beauty of, I know you are Mr. Clarity, is the beauty of when you have clarity, then you're able to that clarity comes through, and it gets experienced in the same way that you intend for it to be.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. And I just love, as one reads the book, the level of awareness that sort of comes up, and how I want to sort of unfold the conversation is, there are people that they are bullies, and there's targets, as you call them, and there's bystanders as you unpack. And then I kind of get the sense that there are those that are championing somewhat the psychological safe environment. So now, if I just take those four buckets, if we were to in consulting, and say, perhaps what are some of the, well, if we start with the bullies, what are some of their behaviors of the bullies? Number two, what might be the, if we go down the iceberg, what might be some of the mindsets or beliefs for them to behave in that way? And once they are more aware of that, what could be some of the actions they might take to change course? So I'll ask those three questions across all four sort of sets of of people, if you do it.
So first of all, I do not refer, you'll recall, you'll see in the book that I don't refer to them as bullies. I refer to them as abrasive leaders that bully.
Yes.
Bully. So that's also intent, the power of language. And why I do that is because abrasion is a behavior. Abrasion is a behavior. So abrasive leaders that bully, with the right kind of support, and with the heightened level of self-awareness, they can change their behavior. Whereas a bully is more an identity, almost presupposes that, that's just what you are, who you are. So one of the, in terms of what I've learned about and working with abrasive leaders that bully, is that first and foremost, some of the reasons that they actually do bully or exhibit bullying behavior is organizations themselves, is the social conditioning from organizations. It's when you look at what organizations measure, what they care about is performance, is getting the targets, driving performance. It doesn't matter how you get that. So there's also a level of social conditioning, and that wires the kind of behavior where the only way you can get results is by coercing people into abrasion. So how does it come about? Some of the behavior is more overt, is the behavior that you see, the screaming and demeaning of people in public, belittling, calling names, and always when something goes wrong, it's the blaming kind of posture. It's never my fault, it's your fault, you stupid, and all of that. The other behavior and some of the tactics is so subtle that it leaves the target also being questioning themselves as to whether, am I imagining things, or start to question yourself, perhaps this person is right, perhaps I'm not that great, and so on and so forth. And some examples of the behavior, subtle behavior of bullying, is marginalization, being marginalized, and that can also include, access to information. I get appointed, I'm the project manager on this whatever project I'm leading, and as my manager, in order for me to succeed, I need to have access to the information. I need to have access to meetings. But when you call meetings that are relevant to me, I'm not invited. The information is not shared with me. Some of it is manipulative or threats. Or when I'm wanting you to do something that I know I should not even be asking you in the first place. When I question, the threats of legal processes or threats of insubordination, the most common one. But what I love, the definition that I really love, which is contained in the Code of Good Practice. And for the first time in South Africa, we have a legal framework through
Lovely.
which that to look at bullying, and the Code of Good Practice for the Prevention and Elimination of Harassment. Yes, it locates bullying within the context of harassment, but it says it's behavior that impairs dignity. I mean,
Sure.
how powerful is it? And sometimes, you know, you might ask, what is behavior that impairs dignity? Some of the behaviors that I've described are that, but you and I know, and our bodies would know, our bodies always give us information. When you do or say something to me that that makes me feel disrespected, I'm going to know immediately.
So I wonder what one has to believe about the target to exhibit that set of behavior. What should the mindset be of people that have this abrasive behavior towards their fellow colleagues?
So first and foremost, research has some of the little research that I've done post my big study, and working also with abrasive leaders, because I do coach them. I've also decided that I realized that working in whatever interventions that you do to address this problem of abrasive behavior of bullying, unless it involves the abrasive leaders who bully themselves, the interventions are likely not to be sustainable. So I decided at that point, I suppose it was out of curiosity, I wanted to understand why people behave in the way that they do. And one
Yes.
of the things that I found, contrary to some of the beliefs we may have held, is that many, if not many, are not aware. They do not have that deepened self-awareness, what we call emotional intelligence. They don't have the heightened level of self-awareness to understand that, how the way they lead and how they show up impacts the direct environment. So the first mindset, before
Yeah.
we even get to mindsets, is, are you aware?
Sure.
And when you get this awareness, how do you take it? Of course, the first thing is going to be defense. They are more often than not, they tend to be defensive. Oh, I'm not a bully. I'm just a strong manager. I drive
Of course.
performance
Of
hard.
course.
And because many of the bullying scenarios, there's somehow two things that are always in place. There's performance and power. And
Sure.
but specifically power imbalance. Somebody that has got more power than the other, therefore feeling I control you. And I can cajole you to do something that I want you to do, even if you disagree with it. So before we even get to the mindset and the changing of mindset, is what do you do with this awareness when you become aware of your impact on the direct environment, your
Sure.
impact on others, why you rub people the wrong way, is after the denial and the defense. If somebody says, this is my favorite phrase to hear, when someone says, I had no idea.
Sure.
When
Sure.
I hear that, I almost feel like doing a happy dance, because then I know that there is hope yet. That's all it takes, because
Sure.
then from then on, you can work around, okay, how do you show up? Where is the source? When you know what happens when you get into deeper coaching conversations, a lot of it, some of the foundation may come from home, how they were raised, and be strong. You can't show your weakness, and so on and so forth. Then we start to deal with some of those, and it takes commitment and willingness. And this is probably where the mindset, and maybe the learning mindset and the growth mindset, is always helpful to shift abrasive leaders from bullying to becoming the best versions of themselves.
Lovely, 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 lovely. So I love that. So we have got this set of players here in the organization. Then there are the set of players who you refer to as targets, and the choice of words is deliberate and intentional.
Yes.
So I just wonder what they get to experience, and if this is long term, what are their behaviors in the journey? And possibly for this to continue, what do they need to believe? What could be their mindsets for them to stay in that space? And the last question really is, what could they shift? What could they do if they're in that environment?
Yeah. First, I mean, I write about targets and why they get targeted. So one of the things that I wrote about reluctantly, because I didn't want the book to be about me, is I gave an example, because we tend to have misconceptions about people that get targeted. That they are people perhaps who are quote unquote weak, or people that can stand up and speak up for themselves. Far from the truth. In fact, studies also have shown that most of the typologies, people that get targeted, of course, some people might be more introverted, or risk not being confrontational. But it's precisely people with strong personalities, with strong interpersonal relations, people that have the ability to interact with people, and people that are more the go-to people for others that get targeted. And why? Because many abrasive leaders that bully tend to have a high level of self. Everything is about self-interest. And when somebody like this comes into the space, the situation, they tend to shift the spotlight from the bully to this person, and they dislike that.
Sure.
So those are some of the reasons why people get bullied. And the other is, what we would call othering. The world of work now is so different, is so diverse. And in some industries, I remember in one of the industries where I did research, which was manufacturing at the time, many years ago. So it was a space where many, for example, women, there weren't many women in the workplace. So difference also draws attention, particularly you have a difference and competence, and difference and competence, because that's not the narrative that other people want to have, that you are different there and you are here. You cannot be here because you're competent. You're here because of how you look, and so on. I remember many years ago, that was the case about me, and the research is that you're here because of employment equity. There isn't anything else that you can offer. So already before you even do anything, you are already painted with you're an employment equity appointee. And we all know about the biases, unconscious biases. If I hold this bias about you, that you're an employment equity appointee, I'm going to find every piece of information that confirms the view that I hold about you. And
Sure.
when you react or respond that I'm actually not that, and you question that, that's where often some other time might lead into bullying. And especially if the person is in a powerful position, it's more about power and influence, and I will put you in your place. So
Sure.
there is that. So and in some instances, um, I'd argue that targets often therefore have some of the attributes that abrasive leaders that bully do not have themselves. So it becomes, like, okay, I may not have that, you may have that, and you may be liked. However, I have the power, and I'm going to use my power
Sure.
to put you in your place, so to speak. So
Sure.
the one thing I always say when I talk with targets is that when you are going through this, it's horrible. I'll tell you that. It's very, very horrible to go through bullying. Just last week, I was running a session where I have, for the first time, the amount of tears that were going in there.
Sure.
And I said, how can people do that? And it kind of got to me, the pain that people are going through, and people feel helpless because we're also living in a tough economic environment. Everybody's worried about losing my job, so I'm not going to do or say anything. What I often say is that first of all, record, document everything that happens.
Good.
Document, because for me, I suppose writing, and this is what I also talk about it in the book, is I love journaling. So when I'm in a good space, I'm happy or unhappy, I pour my heart, my emotions into the journal. So, and I know that not everybody enjoys journaling, but it's more around finding what works for you. But whatever it is, write it down. This is why at the bag, which is accredited a colleague, there's a self-assessment to ensure that what is happening to you is bullying. So I encourage people to get the book and then look at the self-assessment
Of course.
to ensure that what is actually happening is bullying. Write it down, try get help. I often said, who is your tribe? Get at least one or two or three people around you that were somebody to talk to, because whatever you do, don't do anything, talk to somebody. If you can, seek professional help. Because it can be very, very painful and can be destructive. The impact of it, we all know, it's been documented, the impact on the health, mental health, and so on and so forth. So do something about it.
Sure.
I write it down. I also caution against trying to go toe to toe with the abrasive leader, because you're going to lose. We are wired differently. Having said that, though, at some point, and why I say gather information, document everything, because at some point, hard as it might be, you're going to have to confront and have a conversation. But you have to base your conversation on fact, on behavior, and all that. So that's why I recommend actually documenting your own experiences. So that's that's on the target side. And then there's this wonderful player called bystander.
Yes.
And And this is the kind of response I always get when I talk about the bystander. So in simple terms, the bystander is somebody that's obviously not the bully or the abrasive leader, and is not a target, but it's somebody that witnesses the bullying. And oftentimes, why the term bystander comes from is from the bystander effect, is that you watch and do nothing.
Sure.
And when I did a focus groups on bystanders and had the conversation, and they were saying it is horrible to watch.
Sure.
And most end up not doing anything because it's about self-preservation. They would say, this is so bad, it's horrible, but I'm so glad that that is not happening to me.
Sure.
And while I understand some of the interventions, the work that I do is I fully do understand it's about safety, it's about people not feeling safe to speak up. However, that's also not sustainable. That's in a way is an enabling the behavior. And of course, some bystanders, again, for self-preservation, would end up actually standing with the abrasive leader instead of supporting the target. But what I say is, think about if it was you who was the target and people are around here and watching and doing nothing. And remember, today's bystander is possibly tomorrow's target.
Sure.
So then I usually then work with bystanders, and sometimes you don't have to do anything big or get yourself in trouble. The intervention might simply be when you see something happening, reaching out to the target and just simply saying, are you okay? By doing that simple gesture, you are distracting the abrasive leader. So sometimes it might take as a little gesture such as that to intervene. Intervene does not always mean big things. And of course, the other is, if you do not feel safe, you can report it on behalf, the bullying on behalf of the target. So that's the bystander. The last bucket you wanted me to talk about is psychological safety.
Yes. So what does it look like to be a champion of psychologically safe workplaces?
So a psychologically safe work environment is simply a work environment where everybody feels comfortable to speak up, to share their thoughts, including to offer feedback even to the leaders without fear of intimidation or retribution. So in its simplest form, that's what psychological safety is. And I'm currently, I just read a book which I recommend anybody that's interested in this to read. It's called Fearless Organizations.
Yes.
And Fearless Organizations by Amy Edmondson, Professor Amy Edmondson, who's regarded as the guru in psychological safety. And I'm actually not only did I read the book, because I tend to read the book and do something about it when I find something. I'm actually going through a course, going through the process of getting myself accredited as a psychological safety in a practitioner, using Amy Edmondson's model to measure psychological safety in teams and organizations and design interventions out of that. So essentially, psychological safety is the foundation. Amy says in Fearless Organizations, and I love this phrase, the framing. She
Yeah,
says psychological safety is the soil.
sure.
Psychological safety is the soil. So when the soil is fertile and the fruits, some of the fruits, what you get are diversity, is belonging, is bully free environment. And essentially the things that the key drivers of psychological safety is leader behavior. And leader behavior in my work is abrasive leaders, which is why even the book is titled Building Psychologically Safe Spaces as a way of safeguarding organizations against bullying. So the key drivers of psychological safety is leader behavior, team
Sure.
relationships, and organizational structure. So team relationships, because even in organizations, you cannot have, more often than not, what happens is that some teams are more psychologically safe than others.
Yeah.
So hence the interventions are also it's important to look at psychological safety within teams, what from there and outside. And then
Yeah.
organizational structures speaks to what processes and procedures
Sure.
practices do you put in place to support the sustainability of psychological safety. And it starts with leaders, because leaders, I often talk about, in my other work, I talk about the importance of leaders understanding the shadow that
Oh,
they
yes.
cast in organizations. Leadership shadow, every leader
Mm,
has got a shadow, and it really is based on four elements: what a leader says,
sure.
how a leader behaves, what a leader prioritizes, and what a leader measures. For it to be psychologically safe, space to be all these four components must be congruent. In other
Lovely.
words, what a leader says must find expression in how they behave, must find expression in what they prioritizes, and must find expression in what they measure. And then, if all these four are congruent, we're likely to have a psychologically safe environment.
Oh, stunning. I know we're at the top of the hour and it feels so sad to kind of sort of close the conversation here. Dr. Ngao, excellent work. We are so grateful for your insights. When is the next book coming?
Oh, please. I mean, so I'm actually thinking about not so much of a book. I suppose it is a book. To creating a workbook out of this, because
Yes.
that's what I'm getting more and more. I mean, part of
Yeah.
what is in there, some of the reflective questions and the two assessment tools at the end. And people are saying, the feedback I'm getting is that we want more of that. So I'm toying with the, don't hold me to it, but I'm toying with the idea of creating a workbook out of
And
this.
and perhaps people might be certified in your work. And we have more and more of you all over the globe
That
doing
would be
awesome
wonderful.
work.
That would be great. That would be great. Another plant, another seed planted. That's great.
All right, so I know we've gone over time and we all have to run. Thank you so much. And thanks for all that you do for all of us. And in particular to me, I can tell stories and stories about how you've just been so awesome. Have an awesome day and I look forward to our
Thank
next
you
video.
so much for the opportunity. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome. Lovely.
Okay, great. Okay, bye.